Hello and welcome, Managing Madrid Podcast listeners. We got a big show today. We're going to bring in Sam Sharpe, and there's no one better on planet Earth than Sam Sharpe when it comes to Castilla, knowing Castilla in and out. He's been following Castilla for over a decade now. He knows the ins and outs. How good is Raul? How good is Arbeloa? How good are the players? So I'm really excited to talk to Sam about Arbeloa and how he might set up Real Madrid tactically, the personnel, which youth players he'll use. Um, I want to put a final bow on the Xabi Alonso era first, and just give some further thoughts, almost final reflection. Yesterday was a really busy and big day for us for obvious reasons, and we did a lot to cover that. If you guys missed it, you should go back and watch/listen to the Churros y Tácticas podcast yesterday, where we reacted live in real time to Xabi Alonso's dismissal. And I use the word dismissal intentionally because, and I'll get to that in a second, but that's a very well intentioned um, use of that word on my end. It's not a dismissal. It's not a departure. It's a dismissal. We reacted that for about 2 hours. You can go look at that on the Churros y Tácticas podcast. It's also on the Managing Madrid YouTube channel. I also wrote a big piece about Xabi Alonso last night, and I'm biased, but in my opinion, it's the best and most comprehensive and most detailed piece on the whole Xabi Alonso thing that you'll read anywhere on the internet. It's pinned on managingmadrid.com. Looks at the whole Xabi thing from all angles. Go read that, please. A lot of you guys are podcast listeners, but you don't consume our written content. Make sure you go do that. Managingmadrid.com. I wrote about it. It's pinned on the website. But I do have some further thoughts on it this morning and today, and I've thought about it a little bit more. And as always, the next day when you think about it a little bit more, I wouldn't say come to different conclusions or anything like that, but you have new takes and you have things to add, more layers to add to the whole thing. And I just want to say that I am just so disappointed in everyone. The board, the players, and I will say Xabi himself too. I don't think he's without blame. Everyone should be held accountable for their own part in this. I think Xabi Alonso have used different lineups? Could Xabi Alonso have made different subs? Could his in-game management have been better? Could he have continued with his own ideas without deviating it and giving in to what the players wanted? Could he have stuck with his game plan and just died by his own sword? Could he have done all these things differently? Yeah, sure. I do think those final few points that I mentioned are more difficult than people imagine or are really fully realize. I think if you replay Xabi Alonso's career like 10 more times, like simulate it, right? I think it is successful in probably 9 out of 10 of these situations that he doesn't come to Real Madrid this early. I think he was one big club away from arriving here. Needed probably one more big club to baby step it towards Real Madrid because he needed to see what it's like to manage stars firsthand. He had stars at Leverkusen, but if you want to mention people like Florian Wirtz or Frimpong or whoever, they were not established superstars that he has at Real Madrid. It's a situation where it's wildly different because people like Wirtz and Frimpong, Xabi himself groomed. He took over a relegation zone team and they grew together. He got the best out of that group and he made them stars. They had an invincible season. They grew together. That kind of bond is forever. It's something that will be cherished in all those people's lives. And Xabi was the chief instigator of that. That's much different than coming into a club and managing a team of players whose bellies are full, who no longer have leaders and veterans to keep those younger stars in check. And so he came into this, even with his experience as a Real Madrid player and the star-studded locker rooms he's been in, he was surprised at how difficult it was to get everyone to buy in, and especially key figures. And he learned that the hard way. And I think wherever he goes, I think he's going to be successful. I wish him the best of luck. Hey, you never know. Maybe he's going to be back in 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years. I don't know. No one knows anything, to be honest. It's unpredictable. We don't know. But of course, you can't time these things. You can't perfectly map out your career ever. That's not how life works. Of course, even as a club, you can't pull off the timing perfectly. You can't plan to bring in a manager at a certain time. This is all about timing and luck and who's available, which manager is doing good, which manager is available, all this stuff. The timing is it's an entire uh conveyor belt of managers, and some of them fall off, some of them stay on, some of them take a break, some of them come back, some of them are successful, they don't need to leave. It's impossible. So when Real Madrid call you, you have to say yes. I don't blame Xabi one bit for taking that job. Everyone would do the same thing. You never know when Real Madrid are going to call again. Maybe Real Madrid bring in someone else after Ancelotti, and whoever that is, that person is successful and it stays for 5 years, and now you don't have an opportunity to coach Real Madrid, and maybe in those 5 years, now all of a sudden the timing for you also has changed. You're somewhere else and you're under contract, so you have to say yes when Real Madrid call. You have to. I get that, but it's probably too soon, and he needed to baby step it a little bit. You know, maybe baby step it from Bayer Leverkusen to Liverpool is the obvious one, and then Real Madrid. So uh, it's unfortunate that it came to that, but I'm disappointed in how it all unfolded. But I would be more disappointed in the players and the board more than anything. And here's why. You know, these stories of players not wanting to watch film. And keep in mind one very, very important thing that I haven't seen many people talk about, this angle of it. They went from Ancelotti to Xabi Alonso. I don't know if people really fully realize how different these two figures are. It's a lot like going from Ancelotti to Benitez, Benitez to Zidane, or that season where we went Lopetegui to Solari to Zidane. These are all wildly different characters, different philosophies, and it's always difficult to transition for players who are used to a certain thing when something becomes so different and the culture shifts that much. You went from a manager in Ancelotti who, by all reports, you know, in the Bayern dressing room when he was at Bayern, they complained and said, "We don't work hard enough in training. We don't train enough. We're not prepared." Cristiano Ronaldo has come out and said publicly, when Ancelotti was our coach, we never spoke about tactics in training ever. It was not something we did. And that's Ancelotti's style. It's not right or wrong. It's his style, and he's very successful with that. So he went from light training sessions and a manager who focused on friendships and was very close to the players to someone like Xabi Alonso, who now is about film, intense training sessions, working hard, high intensity. And the players were almost culture shocked by the whole thing. But I firmly believe that as much as we can use that as an excuse in favor of the players, I think you have to be obedient to your coach. You have to be obedient to your boss. And it doesn't matter whether he's right or wrong. What you can do is make suggestions, and the coach and boss needs to always be open-minded to suggestions. But in the end, he has to decide with his own authority what happens. And so these things like the players not wanting to watch film, I'm sorry, but it's uncomfortably familiar to bygone eras of Galacticos. When Vanderlei Luxemburgo came in at Real Madrid and said, "We're going to start training in the morning and I'm banning alcohol." You know what Roberto Carlos and Ronaldo Nazario did? They just took him aside and were like, "Hey, it's not going to fly here. We drink, we party, and we don't train in the morning. So you got to change this because we want to sleep in and we want to drink." And Luxemburgo was like, okay. And that was it. Of course, Luxemburgo didn't last. The board's disrespect of Xabi Alonso and lack of support in him has been apparent for months. And I spoke about this yesterday, but the idea of Zidane coming back is ridiculous for this very reason. Because when the club goes behind your back and tells El Chiringuito to, like, hey, just put it out there, tomorrow if Xabi loses, he's out. He's getting sacked. They did that to Zidane too. And then the club, I want to bring your attention to the wording of their statement yesterday. They said it was a mutual agreement for him to leave. Now, I can tell you for a fact that that's not true. And you guys know I've never been a breaking news type of guy. I've never been interested in being that person. I don't want to be Fabrizio Romano. I don't want to be the guy who breaks news. It's the last thing I want to be known for. I want to be known as the guy who analyzes the game. But I can tell you, I just constantly talk to people. I know things. And if I say something, it's 100% true. And honestly, I don't care if you believe me or not. You can take that information for what you will. I just know what's true in my heart. That's all that matters. I'm just conveying information to you. Xabi Alonso, in no way, shape, or form, wanted to leave. He wanted to stay. They worded it that way. Now, the thing is, Xabi Alonso does not speak ill about anybody. He's got class, and he will never come out and deny that. Quite frankly, it doesn't really matter, but it will matter with the point I'm about to make. Real Madrid are lucky that people like Xabi Alonso and Carlo Ancelotti are very classy, and they will never speak bad about the club, no matter what the club does to these guys. But it's not even about class, actually. Like, one of the most classy and respectful players, Fernando Redondo, the same thing happened to him. But he didn't bite his tongue in that situation. And if you guys had read my article yesterday, you know that I led with this point. When Florentino Perez first came in the year 2000 and brought in Figo, he wanted to sell Fernando Redondo, who was of the old regime with Lorenzo Sanz and very close to Sanz. And Fernando Redondo is a club legend, the greatest defensive midfielder in club history, had zero desire to leave, loved the club to his bones. Coach counted on him, the players backed him, and they sold him. And in their wording in that statement, the day they sold him without his own knowledge, they said Redondo's desire to leave. Redondo then held a press conference for a statement like, I refuse to let this stain my name. I did not want to leave. I did not know about this. This was a complete shock. 26 years later, not much has changed. Yeah, I think things are better, but a lot of these things are the same. And finally, I want to make this point because I've always said it matters how you treat your players and coaches because other people who could potentially play for the club look at that. That's why I've been full of praise when Real Madrid handed out extensions when Militao tore his ACL, when Joan Martinez tore his ACL. They actually extended their contract out of respect. And that stuff really matters to me. I think that's really important. But when other coaches see how Xabi Alonso is being treated, your reputation takes a hit. And I want to read this quote from Jurgen Klopp yesterday. Quote, if Xabi Alonso, who over the last 2 years in Leverkusen has shown that he was an outstanding coaching talent, is then forced to leave Real Madrid just 6 months later, it shows a few things. I think it's another sign that something isn't quite right there at the moment. And if you ever wanted to land someone like Jurgen Klopp, that's what people like Jurgen Klopp are saying about Real Madrid. I'm really disappointed in the board and how they've handled this whole situation. And it goes beyond sporting mistakes. Like, you can make mistakes, bad signings, bad coaching mistakes. It happens. But it's not about that. It's about respect. And they've shown zero respect to legends. And it's disappointing to me. The next coach, Arbeloa, who we're about to get into, I'm gonna save that part for Sam. Is gonna have similar problems. Players incompatible with each other, injuries, all that stuff. The lack of finishing. We created 7 big chances against Barca. scored 2 of them. We've underperformed our XG by 7 this season in the league. One of the worst discrepancies in the league. That's not Xabi's fault. Couldn't have waited, but I think this decision was made before this, and they were just waiting for the right moment. So it is what it is. Best of luck, Xabi Alonso. And now we turn the page because it's ruthless. That's it. We have to turn the page. It's over. We can't feel bad for Xabi anymore. We are full support of Alvaro Arbeloa and hope that he can turn the season around. That's where we are. So we move on. It's over. Let's talk about Alvaro Arbeloa. Thanks for patience and putting up with my rant. Let's get started.
Nice article in the Managing Madrid blog. Wonderful lads that do a great job there. And worth reading about that man there. Karim Benzema needs to rest, and the numbers reveal why.
Times ended up almost looking like a 6-3-1. Some very good writing about that on the Managing Madrid website. First rate podcast as well. Of course, Fede Valverde was a huge part of the equation.
Sam Sharpe, Castilla Guru, the expert. How you doing?
Back again. How's it going?
I'm great. I'm super excited to get your thoughts on everything that's happening right now. What was your... I mean, we all kind of knew if Xabi leaves, the next up is probably Arbeloa. So what was your initial reaction to seeing the appointment?
Well, I wrote a piece that morning looking into and analysing the first half of Castilla's season under Arbeloa, thinking, in a couple months, he could well take the helm. I think 4 hours later, the club announced that Alonso was departing. It didn't take long for Arbeloa to be announced as the new manager, and it was shock, actually. The first thought, it reminded me way back when Solari was drafted in after shit really hit the fan. I think you actually let that news. I was out working at the time in the evening, and you texted me saying, we'll have to do a pod tonight. And it was similar. People were texting me now saying, have you seen this? And it was a level of shock. And then you think about it and you look into things a little bit more, and there is that feeling of disappointment for Xabi and how his reign kind of panned out. And I don't know if it's optimism, but it might be hopeless and aimless optimism towards the future, at least trying to steer towards the summer without any further embarrassment or heavy defeats.
I also thought of you because, you and I have had so many jokes over the years about Solari, and I thought about that year with the Solari year and how crazy it was. And reflecting on it now, it's like I weirdly have fond memories of that because it was like the Vinicius emergence. He was really raw, but he was a kid, but you could see the brilliance. And then the fact that Solari came in, and to his credit, even though the team sucked, he made decisions on his own volition and had some balls. And he was like, all right, I'm bringing in Reguilon as my starting left back. Marcos Llorente, we're going to give you some prominence. Vinicius, we're going to accelerate your development. You're being in the A team now. I thought there were like cool things that happened that season that I remember fondly, even though it was one of the worst seasons ever.
Yeah, I mean, situations like that, they call for small victories in a way, and baby steps. And I think actually we will not exactly see similar, but in terms of that bridge from the academy to Castilla to the first team, I think there's going to be plenty of benefits and opportunities given out to some of the players that just the other day he was coaching himself. So yeah, there are positives. It's not all negative, or there's no need for concern on every single factor in terms of this hiring. But at the same time, it's not all plain sailing.
Well, the other thing I thought of, Sam, was Raul must be kicking himself. Like he waited
6 years, man.
He waited so long. If he had just stayed one more, this would have been him.
Yeah, I mean, 7 is ridiculous. 6 is ridiculous. It was far too long, but it must be agonizing because again, they tend to look inward and hire internally. So if this happened last season, then even if Raul wasn't, in the biggest of favors with the board or whoever, he still probably would have got the job. So yeah, frustrating, I imagine. And potentially, we can speak about this at some point, potentially he would have been even now a stronger candidate for the situation.
What do you mean by that? How come?
I think the way that he handles egos, even on a small scale, he had the most expensive Castilla team of all time, and it's not close. He had Vinicius, he managed there, he managed Rodrigo, he managed Renier, and he had to keep them in check when they were playing people who are making, if a full-time wage, minimum wage. And respect was key for him. He also was unbelievably adaptable as a coach. And again, a lot of people didn't actually like that, but he would go out and he would get results. He would make those playoffs if he had to, and he would do anything to make those playoffs. He was outspoken, and again, tactically very, very adaptable. And that's one thing, it's one concern I have with Arbeloa, is that isn't the case here. And I don't think his tactical implementations are going to fly here at the first team. So I don't actually know how it's going to pan out. But with Raul, I don't think he would have been scared to come in and really try and crack the whip.
I do think in terms of a personality who's allowed to crack a whip, I even though Raul is inexperienced as a coach, I really can't think of anyone better than that in terms of like this Raul. Like you're gonna tell Raul, no, I'm not doing that. Really? You think that's gonna go down
Madrid, well? Yeah. No, exactly.
You know, your point about Arbeloa's tactics and how they might not fly. Someone asked me, I do this Instagram Q&A on the Managing Madrid stories almost daily. And someone asked me, can you speak about Arbeloa's tactics at Real Madrid? I was like, I could answer this, but like, what does it mean? It doesn't mean anything. Like, and I'm being honest, like I want to explore that with you. But what I mean by that is like, if you go back to Xabi Alonso's first press conference as a Real Madrid coach, he was like, we want to be proactive, take initiative. We want to dominate. We want to give the fans a show. I could sit here and tell you that Arbeloa is a high-pressing team. He uses his fullbacks. He wants to control the game. What does that mean? Does it mean anything? It doesn't mean anything because Real Madrid doesn't. You can't just do that. Xabi Alonso wanted to do that too. He couldn't. And but it's a conversation we have to have anyway. So why don't you tell us Arbeloa's coaching philosophy at Castilla? How did that look?
It's going to be exactly the same as what you just said. As I say, no, in terms of the way he's been in the academy, the way he's managed himself at Castilla, it's all about high intensity, which again may present an issue going forward. But for young and hungry players, they're perfectly happy to work very, very hard. They're obviously playing for their professional career, not just their spot at Real Madrid, but their footballing careers, what they want to do as a job in the future. So they give 100%, he gets 100%, and he demands 100%. It normally looks like a 4-3-3. It can be a 4-2-3-1, depending on availability and what the squad looks like or the opposition. But on the ball, it's all very sharp. It's all very quick. It's all very direct. And it's pretty football, and it's quite effective. He wins a lot more games, and he always has won more games than he's lost. Off the ball, it is unfortunately all about pressing. The team works very hard collectively as a group to win that ball back. And the big problem he's found at Castilla, which he didn't find in the academy much because it's unusual for the academy teams not to win nearly every game. But at Castilla, where it's a lot more competitive, they have been played through many, many times. And the big problem I have with Arbeloa is that he's not tactically adaptable at all. I would say that Alonso, given his ideal scenario, I think he is. He can change it up depending on who he's playing, who's available. With Arbeloa, that isn't the case. And they lose in the last game. I think that's a perfect example of that. His last game at Castilla, he lost 4-1. At halftime, the score was 4-1. There was never going to be a comeback there. You just how. And when they've been found out, that's it. There is nothing. And it becomes worryingly similar to the first team, where there's a lot of passive pressing. A lot of people looking like they're working hard, but in reality, I don't think they quite understand their roles. And there's just, no adaptability there. So the biggest worry is that lack of plan B. And in the first team where you're coming up with, some of the best managers in the world against you, I think at some point he will be found out. And that's if the squad hasn't imploded internally already. So, there is a lot to be concerned about.
So would you say that he needs to be more versatile than he is?
Oh, 100%. To the point where he isn't versatile at all. And because going into the first team setup, I don't think that his philosophy is going to match the player characteristics and skill set at all. I think that his adaptability will look like effectively just facilitation in a way, and he will play players to keep them happy. If they're happier, they'll probably, give that moment of quality that's required to get results most of the time. He'll win more games than he loses, and my prediction is he'll probably go out quietly in the summer if things don't go wrong beforehand. But yeah, there's unfortunately no plan B whatsoever with Arbeloa, and that's for Castilla that was worrying because they may not have made the playoffs and reached their own objective. But for the first team, I think it would be substantially more worrying.
I mean, the hope is, and I mean, I know the assumption right now is kind of like, and the reason why we didn't talk about Arbeloa much, obviously, because we have to ride the Xabi Alonso wave. That hasn't really fully ended yet, although it is now. But also, I think a lot of people feel that Arbeloa's name is kind of transitory, in some ways. It's a placeholder until you get someone you want in the summertime. And Arbeloa doesn't quite inspire emotion the way Zidane did when he went halfway through this. Remember when Zidane came in? I remember that first game against Deportivo La Coruña. It was a 5-1 win. There were banners of Zidane everywhere. I mean, Zidane. So, even though it felt like, yeah, he might be transitory, there was excitement about him just being there. You know what I mean? Yeah, this is unfair to Arbeloa, by the way. Like a guy that you and I both really like. We have fond memories of him. He's a good dude by all accounts. But I think what the hope is that actually, no, he proves everybody wrong and somehow turns it around. And you never know with this team. Maybe he wins titles. Maybe. I don't know. And if he does, then he's not a transitory coach anymore. He stays.
I think my biggest worry is that he was developing pretty nicely and he was coming along quite fine, on the same kind of bell curve as most Castilla coaches, and they always tend to go on to coach higher, if not the Real Madrid first team at some point. But that developmental journey has been halted, and he's kind of been plucked out of that environment and placed into a chaotic one. So again, maybe he can instill calm. This is a clean slate. That's a really big positive. Xabi Alonso would have probably given his right arm for a clean slate like this. So you never know. He's a very similar coach to Xabi, is one thing I will say. I've seen comparisons over the last day or so of Mourinho and Zidane at his time at Cestero, and I think that it couldn't be further from the truth. I think he is almost like a little mini carbon copy of Xabi in a way. Whether you like that or not, I don't know. Whether people think that's a positive, I don't know. But yeah, at least he's going to have that clean slate with the players. They've got no beef with him at the moment.
At the moment, yeah. You start working with someone every day, you can go from friends to enemies real quick. But I don't know. That's an assumption. I mean, the thing is, I see a lot of comments like, well, if they didn't listen to Xabi, why would they listen to Arbeloa? But then I also think, I get why you would say that, but also just to bring a different perspective, sometimes just you, without really being able to explain it, people can connect differently to different people. Maybe Arbeloa is able to connect with the players the way Xabi couldn't. I don't know. It's possible. And you mentioned, he's more similar to Xabi than he is to Mourinho. And obviously, someone actually asked him about Mourinho today, and he laughed and he was like, "Yeah, I knew someone was going to ask me that." I don't think the Mourinho comparisons came as a result of his tactics, but because of his characters. So, what about forget his coaching philosophy on the tactical level, but what about his personality, on the sidelines and the way he deals with players? Do you have any insight on that?
Yeah, his man management, he keeps it quite closed, really. But interestingly, he's the first manager, I don't know if it's a sign of the times, that's been very active on social media throughout all of this. And he follows the players, he interacts with them, he comments on all their stuff. And they seem to really respect him. And they always have from under 19s level onwards. So I think the biggest example you could give is probably the case of Iker Bravo. I don't know if anyone remembers him. Big talent, a lot of hype. Came into Castilla. Really promising, but he was, I don't know how I can say this in a politically correct way. He was terrible. He performed terribly, and his attitude didn't reflect in the brightest of lights at times. He let himself down many, many times. He's actually one of the only players I've ever seen, probably the only one to be demoted full time from Castilla to Arbeloa's under 19s. Arbeloa took him under his wing, and I know it's a huge drop in standard from professional football to academy football, but he was scoring at that point, he was performing, and he really respected Arbeloa highly, to the point where he then got a move to Serie A. Obviously, he never plays. That's his problem. But in terms of man management and managing egos and managing, the big names, even in that smaller pool and that smaller realm, Arbeloa seems to be well respected, well liked, and as you say, it takes certain moments and certain instances to spark a bond or a strong relationship, and Arbeloa certainly seems to do and say the right things. You saw that in the press conference today, so I wouldn't see that as a negative. I'd say I think he can handle stars to an extent. Real Madrid's obviously it's a different realm, it's a very different level. But you only need some players on side in the first day, and then you can try and build from there.
It was it was interesting to kind of just see him in the press conference today, just because it was I think he seems to enjoy press conferences a little bit more than previous Real Madrid coaches. Like, he seemed to be ready to poke fun at journalists, and like the guy who asked about the referee, and he was like, "Come on, dude, you're asking me about a referee before I haven't played a game yet." And he also seemed to acknowledge journalists by name, like when they introduce themselves. It'll be interesting to see how he navigates it. Again, like I said, I think it's easy to sit here and say, well, if Xabi couldn't, who is Arbeloa to be able to do it? But I also think different people just connect differently with different people. That's all it is. Like, sometimes you can't explain it. Just because you're a star or a bigger star doesn't mean you're going to connect with players better than someone else like Arbeloa. And in some ways, maybe Arbeloa is better because he wasn't a Xabi level star, but he was kind of one of those guys who was like one of the bricks of the team that come in and worked his ass off, did a job, and you could rely on him for effort all the time. In some ways, maybe that will help, because I think Xabi seemed to be almost above that, to just want to instruct youth players. Obviously, you go ahead.
No, you go. No.
Well, I'll just quickly turn it into a question. As we know, when a Castilla manager gets promoted, the question is always which youth players will he bring with him? And it typically does happen that you'll see youth team players play, at least initially. And I think by the time Zidane left, he really never, ever used the youth system at all. But when he first arrived, it seemed like he wanted to kind of bridge that gap. And obviously, Solari used them when he came in. Who are the stars of Castilla that, realistically speaking, that the team could really use and Arbeloa could use?
Yeah, it's not the highest quality roster that we've seen over the years, but there is a lot of quality sprinkled in there. There's a few gems in the rough there, and a few that Arbeloa, is seriously high on. I mean, he called Jorge Cestero the best number 6 in Spain at the start of the season, and not many people knew much about Cestero actually when he was promoted. It looked like he was just going to be another routine bench player coming through, will try to get to the second division and not much more. But he's been a revelation this season. He's really been awesome. And it's really what has been lacking, actually, that kind of recruitment from the academy in previous years. So the quality and standard has raised this season, partly due to Cestero, who's a ball carrier. He's a defensive midfielder who effectively is all over the pitch. His heat map is probably all over that centre circle and beyond. And he's just become so integral for the system that Arbeloa likes to play. Just Castilla as a team in the third division, with his physicality, which sometimes is lacking, especially in other midfielders like Thiago Pitarch, who is, again, hugely hyped up, supreme on the ball, technically superior. He'll ball carry, and he would improve Real Madrid's ball progression as well, significantly, but physically lacking. It's his first season in senior football. Managing, exactly the same type of player, has been around a little bit longer but suffered from injuries. And that midfield has really worked for Arbeloa. In fact, they've probably come along the most. At times, the team has been carried by Cesar Palacios. There's always a golden boy at Castilla. Sometimes it's Oscar Rodriguez, Martin Odegaard, Nico Paz, whoever. At the moment, it's Cesar. And without him, maybe Castilla wouldn't be anywhere near as high as they are. So I don't know if he would get rewarded. I hope he would. At the moment, he's a top scorer and top assister. And players like that tend to get some recognition at times. So yeah, the midfielders they come along the most. But in terms of Real Madrid in the first team, obviously, if you're a defender, you're licking your lips all the time because they just always seem to be injured. There's always seems to be gaps and opportunities opening up, and even times up front, there's always spaces opening up. So there's quite a few players that should and could get opportunities. Obviously, Arbeloa was their manager yesterday. He's the Real Madrid first team manager today. Albacete's the first game in the Copa del Rey, so you never know.
What about some of the players in the back line? Like, obviously some of the hyped players, unless you mentioned in passing and I missed it, I apologize, but David Jimenez. Could we see Joan Martinez? I know Arbeloa had, I wouldn't call it taking shots, but he had a comment about Joan Martinez earlier this season that he needs to step up. Aguado, Valdepenas. I mean, obviously, I'm talking about like situations where we have injured players. Like if Mendy's injured, if Fran Garcia is injured, instead of putting Carreras is injured, instead of putting, something boring like Housen at left back, would Arbeloa put Valdepenas? If we're missing our two right backs and Fede doesn't want to play there, would Arbeloa use Jimenez?
I think this is where the biggest opportunities will come. And again, those defensive players should be licking their lips because David Jimenez, for instance, came into Cestero a bad player. I didn't really like him at all. And now I think he's one of the strongest players in the team. I think he's got so much quality and he's just turned around his entire career trajectory there in just a couple of seasons. I'd love to see him get more opportunities with the first team. He's obviously had 2 appearances so far. One was for about a minute in La Liga, and then in the Cup, he managed to play a lot more. Yeah, I think he will. Left back is hard because there's one natural left back at Castilla and he isn't good enough for Castilla. So I don't think he's going to get a first team opportunity. Valdepenas can play there. Aguado can play there. Maybe he would. I don't know. In terms of right back, I think he will have no issue slotting Jimenez in there. And that's my hope anyway. And you never know. He might go in and just be passive. And again, if he's choosing teams every week to try and keep people happy, Castilla players aren't going to get a look in. But if he does try and inflict some personality into the team and make it his own, then I would expect Castilla players, especially when there's injuries all around, to gain opportunity. Yeah,
I would love to see it. I've been one of those that just want to see more of the academy. And I'm not saying like bring him in and start them and dominate Europe, but I'm saying like there's clear situations when you have injuries. You don't need to play players out of position. That like these guys are really good. They can help.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Joan Martinez took his last opportunity all the way back when. He's been pretty good this season. I think the criticism was fair. I still think he's probably been the highest performing defender, maybe. I mean, they've conceded a lot of goals, but they always will from set pieces and whatnot. It's natural. But I still think he's been performing at a decent level, just perhaps not as high as the hype would have suggested. But he's back from a long-term injury, so.
Is the set piece conceding, does that have to do with just the fact that they're kids playing against grown men, or is there something else?
Yeah, I think there's a few things. It doesn't matter who you get in at Castilla. It could be Pep Guardiola. They're never going to pick up that many points away from home because they're going to very intimidating local atmospheres where you can hear everyone shouting at you. Yeah, the players are very physical.
Playing against less talented, angry men who are jealous of.
Absolutely. So you're never going to pick up many points away from home. And when you concede, you'll probably concede higher than usual. And a lot of it is going to be based on set pieces and crosses coming into the box, direct play. It's hard. Some managers do slightly better statistically than others, but you're always going to, unfortunately, be susceptible to that.
There is a phenomena, as you know, Sam, that like, and I don't watch Castilla as much as I used to, in part because it's harder to do that now. Like there was a time when Real Madrid TV showed them all live. They don't have the rights anymore. But I'm like, even going back to players like Reguilon or even coaches like Zidane, who to us were not that impressive at the Castilla level. But when they came to the senior level, they just looked way better. And maybe it has to do with the talent that's around them or whatever. It's contextual. Is there room for Arbeloa to do that? I also think it's fair to point out that Zidane, as great as he was, did come in mid-season to coach Cristiano fucking Ronaldo and Tony fucking Cruz and Luka fucking Modric and Mars fucking Elo and Danny fucking Carp. Like these guys, these are like the greatest players in club history. There's also that. Like Arbeloa is not walking into that. But is there room for Arbeloa to maybe that this is actually his calling more than Castilla was?
I think it's all about the small victories. I don't want to be too pessimistic and say no. I see him as a hiring that kind of restores the balance of power away from the manager until at least the summer when they can assess other candidates and maybe find that perfect fit. I don't see him as a long term, and maybe they are just throwing the dice and hoping maybe he does do something miraculous and then he can stay long term. But I think, I don't know, even his press conference today, he was asked obviously about the egos, he was asked about the young players, officiating and whatnot. His answers were mostly kind of generic and scripted, and that's fine. You don't want to be explosive in your first interview, but some of them, I know a lot of players and a lot of fans, sorry, reacted quite angrily to the question about egos and kind of saw him as maybe stroking the egos already when a lot of fans are pretty frustrated at the players right now and disappointed. So I don't know. I don't know if it's like a puppet and a yes man at their harsh words. I don't think it is that substantial in terms of why he's there, but I think he is maybe a placeholder until just a later date when they can find that perfect candidate.
I have a rant about this. Fans need to stop caring about what is said in the press conference. Like truly, really and truly. Like it doesn't matter what he says in the press conference. What matters is what, like, are you guys not sick of words? Why do you you think it would be wise of Arbeloa to come and be like, yeah, fuck the egos. I'm gonna stand there with a golf club and I'm gonna he's not like, what do you expect him to say? He's not gonna go throw his players under the bus. Like, stop. I also like the amount of things that I've gotten because like I've over the years I've learned how these things work. And thought like, I'm gonna ask the difficult questions, and I try to, but I also am completely cognizant that, like, when I ask a difficult question that questions the coach, I'm not gonna get a clear answer. I'm gonna get a political answer. So what's the point? Like with Xabi, I realized no matter what I ask him, like, why did you do this? What's tactically, he's just gonna give a generic answer. But if I ask him to open up how good a player is, he's gonna go blah 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 blah, blah and give me a long answer. So that's the route I go. So stop telling journalists what to ask and stop expecting different things. It's just, this is how it works. Like, stop complaining that Arbeloa didn't say, fuck these players. Is what I'm saying.
Seen a lot of it.
I did want to ask you one more thing. We got super chats too, which will take us into more questions. A lot for you, Sam, actually. We were talking about youth players. I can't remember. Well, it might come back to me, but you want to take some super chats?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. One important thing that I forgot to ask you, Sam, is have you been to emoji-mates.com recently?
Well, actually, after your last pitch, I definitely should have. Did you say they had Gonzalo Garcia stuff out?
They just added Gonzalo. After the hat trick, I messaged the owner and I said, hey, where's Gonzalo? We need Gonzalo swag. So they added Gonzalo. They got virtually every Real Madrid player you can imagine. And I'm talking about club history as well. So go get your favorite Real Madrid player on a hoodie, on a T-shirt as a gift, or treat yourself. They got hats, they got bags, and it's super comfortable. I think I have like 30 items from them now at least. My kids have some. Like, it's just out of control. It's might as well just be a Emoji-Mates house exclusively. Guys, go to emoji-mates.com. Use code MM15 for 15% off over on emoji-mates.com. Sam, let's do super chats. If you guys have a super chat, submit them now. We will do a super chat segment. Okay, hold on. I really can't take all of these super chats the way they're worded, to be honest with you, but I'll do the ones that I think are appropriate. Chaitanya and Kane says, Sam/Kiyan, would Arbeloa try to implement his tactics with rigid authority, or would he be applying the Zizou Carlo model, and how much mileage can we get from that?
I think it's going to look more like the Carlo model, whatever that is. I don't know what you would have said that is, just like man management based style. I don't know, but I think it will be rather than structure. I think he will turn towards consolidation a lot of the time and just trying to repair a lot of damage that clearly is kind of rift throughout the squad at the moment. But I don't think he's going to try and implement his tactics because I just can't see them working. So I don't think that's going to happen at all.
There's a question from Atiruru who says, "Best of luck for Xabi. Arbeloa should bring Morinismo to this team. We need villains and bad boys in this soft team. How is he going to approach the Vinicius and Kylian Mbappe situation? Is Arbeloa if Arbeloa blow it up, where do we? If Arbeloa blows it up, where do we go? Go Pitarch. Okay, I see some typos there, but there's a few things that Xabi dealt with that I don't think is going to change for Arbeloa or any future manager. Injuries, uh, the tactical fit complications like Vinicius and Mbappe, which is listed here, the lack of a deep lying ball progressor. I think I mentioned finishing as well. I think that may normalize, hopefully, for Arbeloa. I don't know. Maybe like with the emergence of Gonzalo, Rodrigo now rising into form, maybe that'll help. I think people really underestimate how difficult this Vinicius and Mbappe situation is. It's almost like the situation where you can't bench either of them. So you have to play both of them. And then you just have to hope that they can go in sync. I really don't know. This one really is, it's one of those things that is really hard to solve for any manager. And before the fans come out and say, well, like that's easy, you bench this player or that player. How do you think Florentino Perez felt when Xabi Alonso benched Vinicius? See you later, buddy. You can't I don't think they can. So then you have to make it work, and that's a challenge that Arbeloa and any future coach will have. We have 1.5 season sample size, Sam, of these two. It hasn't been working. Now, if it just clicks and it starts working, then fine, that would be great. But I'm just pointing out the reality that we have almost 2 years of this not working. So is it going to change now? I don't know. You have any thoughts on this?
Again, if he goes in and tries to implement anything, I think it will turn sour very quickly. I don't think it will click. If potentially he laxes up on the structure, maybe there's a chance he can find a way that they can both fit, but he's going to have to give it a lot of thought, like an awful lot of thought, to the point where I wouldn't want that job. I don't know if it's mission impossible. And again, he's been chucked into the deep end, and it feels like that. Yeah, that's a big task, colossal.
Don't worry, Sam. I don't think you're going to be offered this job anytime soon.
I'll take the money.
Sacknick says, Sam, can we expect any kind of Gabri Valero inclusion? Also, is Arbeloa likely to trust Thiago Pitarch for our midfield, which lacks his qualities? How much academy will he be allowed to trust? You kind of answered the Thiago Pitarch section of this, but did you talk about Valero?
Yeah, I mean, he's bit part for Cestero, probably less than that, to be honest. So in terms of first team, no, unfortunately, you can't expect any kind. He does seem quite talented, but I think we'll see him more at Cestero going forward towards next season. So keep an eye on him. But yeah, in terms of first team inclusion, none. I like that Thiago has been mentioned a few times now. He's very rated within the club. Xabi actually played him during preseason. He scored on his debut, I think. Hasn't really been seen since then. There was a little injury, but for Cestero, he hasn't featured that much either. So I don't know. And in terms of him being allowed to trust the academy, I don't know. It's a good question. I think towards the start, because a lot of people haven't actually thought about his schedule. He's not going to face a team like Atletico or Barca until towards the end of March. That gives him a run of 10 games where he's got. Well, he's the favourite in terms of the teams for every single one of those games. They've got a second division in the cup. They then have Rio after that, not long. Tough games, but winnable games, that's for sure. So maybe there will be more trust placed. And again, when it gets to the business end of the season, you have Atletico looming, Barcelona, the Champions League knockouts. I don't think he'd want to place as much trust in the academy, but you never know.
I think the question of will he be allowed to? Yeah, he'll be allowed to use it. but I think he'll be I mean, he really is allowed to do anything. There will be consequences, obviously, but I think again, I think everybody is on the same page on this. Is that you use them for squad fillers and trusting them in certain situations, so you don't have to play everyone out of position. And of course, the context isn't like, okay, you play Champions League final, are you going to trust Pitarch if all your midfielders are injured? Probably not. But if you're up 3-0 against Valencia at home, why not?
Mm.
To like incorporate these players, especially if there's injuries, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Then there's more here. Alberto Batar says, got to feel for Xabi Alonso, turned down Bayern and Liverpool in 2024 to wait for this impossible job. Feel like in hindsight, he was still too green for this. Yeah, Alberto, as I said earlier in the podcast, I think he needed one more baby step before he arrived here at a big club. Sagnick says, what is Mr. Florentino Perez expecting now? Genuine question. What is supposed to happen with Arbeloa's appointment? I'm an Arbeloa fan. I'm 100% backing him, but I'm not buying this group of players anymore.
Again, I think Arbeloa is a vehicle, unfortunately, to steer the club towards the summer without any horrendous disaster happening or heavy defeats. I really think that. So I think in terms of expectations, they're low with some passive hope. But I don't know if they see Arbeloa as the manager going forward after this year.
The club, I think, and this element I don't think we spoke about, the club has gotten away with a lot of bad decisions and just gotten lucky.
Mm.
And they've gotten away with it, and so they keep thinking that like almost everything they do, it'll just work out fine. And they just got lucky. Like, I'm sorry, and I am rooting for Arbeloa. I am. I promise you I am. I want him to succeed. I'd love it. I'd love for him to turn the season around, win titles, and then he stays for a long time and he keeps winning titles. But I'm also here to tell you that if that does happen, the club just got lucky. This was not thought out. The club, when they sacked Ancelotti in 2015, stumbled upon Benitez and then landed on Zidane and won a three-peat. That was luck. That was not a good decision to sack Ancelotti. They got lucky. When they decided not to replace Benzema and then Jude Bellingham scored a bunch of goals, that was luck. Like, that's luck. That's not planned. That's not thought out. And if they struck gold with Arbeloa here and he makes it work, that's just, again, they're just getting away with a lot of stuff. I hope it happens, but it would be the same idea. Next one. Femi says, I read your article and Matt's. They said it all. Yeah, just as a reminder, guys, go please read the content on managingmadrid.com. Staff have been on fire. This is the piece. Matt's article, I think, is this one here, The Inevitable End of Xabi Alonso's Madrid Tenure. This one, again, I'm biased, but it's required reading. It's pinned on the website right now. The details of Xabi Alonso's departure from Real Madrid, not all is what it seems. Go read that, please. Sam, you also pitched your article. You wrote about Arbeloa yesterday, you said?
Yeah,
I gotta read that.
And again, it's out of context now because it's all based on Cestero in his season so far. But there's some good stuff on Arbeloa in there. So if you did want to learn about him and how he fared at Cestero, because now that's his entire tenure, you'd go and read it.
That is, I'm gonna talk to my connections at Managing Madrid. We're gonna get that pinned up. If it's right here, Castilla at the midway mark. Sam, whenever Sam writes a Castilla article, just know it's gonna be 20,000 words long, and it's worth reading. There's a lot of information in there, so go please read Sam's article, Castilla at the midway mark, as well. All right, let's keep moving here. Is there anything else that we want to take? I don't know, maybe not. Shay, I'll message you on WhatsApp. I appreciate the donations. Some of this stuff I don't want to read on air for obvious reasons. Yeah. Okay. Do you have concluding thoughts? Sam, about this whole thing? Arbeloa, Xabi
No, they're
Alonso.
all scrambled to be honest from here. And again, the one reason it reminds me, in a way, of the Solari era is that Solari started off with a pretty kind schedule that I think gave everyone a little false hope about how it might end up. He didn't finish the season. I think Arbeloa is a far superior coach. I mean, he is. It is a fact. I think he can go a lot further. I don't know how much he can get out of his player base. I don't know if it's the right decision to take him out of an environment where he was, again, developing pretty nicely and then throwing him to the wolf pack at the moment. But there's quiet optimism, and there are going to be small victories. I just hope when the time comes, the defeats aren't too heavy.
The funny thing is that we have Albacete tomorrow, so it's like right away we'll see it on a game that I would say is not that much pressure, and it's actually a kind of game that Arbeloa is used to with Castilla because it's an away game. That something I wouldn't say Albacete. I don't. Where does Albacete actually? I know our last opponent Castilla actually beat them like just before we did. But I don't know if Albacete is someone that Castilla plays, but I have to
No,
look at
they're
it.
second division now. Jesus
Yeah.
Vallejo is there, and they signed Lauren
That's right.
Aguado. They've got an okay squad, to be honest. It'll be a harder game than like a third division side. Like they'll have some
Yeah.
quality, but as you say, it should be routine. And I think Arbeloa, one thing that he will be happy about with Castilla, maybe it's his own fault, but he had one winger. There is just one winger at Castilla. He had two available strikers, one really that you could play. So I think he will just be happy about the choice. And maybe if he is going to implement his tactics, it would be good to see him actually utilize different players in different areas. But I don't know. We will see.
I just doing a quick scan. I just want to make sure we don't leave any super chats dry. I think we got it. This one, War Daddy 152. As a fan, I've grown tired of the players' attitudes, not just how they behave with Xabi, but also how they react on the field. It's so negative for the club's image and hampers the performance. Yeah, I think this is a subject we've discussed today, and I think we have discussed many times in the past. My thing has always been that you have to respect the coach. You have to do what is being said, even if it's wrong, even if it's literally the wrong decision. You got to buy in and you deal with those consequences later and you learn from those mistakes as a coach, as a team, as players. You have those conversations. And I don't know. And that's why I just think Arbeloa has a lot of work cut out for him. And I'll go back to the point that I was making earlier was that Xabi Alonso came into a team that had some bellies full, but also a team that didn't have the leaders to keep these younger guys in check. And good luck to Arbeloa. We're rooting for you. We're rooting for you. All right, Albacete tomorrow. We're back on YouTube post game show. Sam, will you be there?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, cool. Sam will be there. I think we're going to bring in Herdium too, our other Castilla expert. We'll do we'll break down that game and see how that goes. Guys, thank you. It's been a busy couple days. Appreciate you guys tuning in to all of our content. We will see you guys tomorrow. You guys are the best. Win, lose, draw, suffering, celebration. We're here. Hala Madrid. Thanks, Sam. Peace out.
See you soon, guys.